I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics, messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for March the 5th, 2026. Yesterday, we started a mini-series on the nations streaming to Zion in the end times, discussing the importance of Micah 4, 1 through 3, and Isaiah 2, 2 through 4. These are very important prophecies as they concern the place of non-Jewish believers within today's Messianic community. Because as much as many of us would believe that we have been set on a Romans 9, 10, and 11 trajectory. And by the way, we did discuss those passages earlier this year, as it involves the salvation of the Jewish people, the restoration of Israel. What about all of these non-Jewish believers who have been supernaturally directed, called, summoned by the Lord into the Messianic community and have embraced various outward things of Torah, like remembering the seventh-day Sabbath, Shabbat, the appointed times, Moedim, a kosher style of diet? How much of this might indeed be related to Micah 4, 1 to 3, Isaiah 2, 2 through 4? So today, as we continue in the series, and this will take us about a week, we will be examining Micah 4, 1 through 3. So please turn with me to the Messianic Apologetics website, click on articles, scroll down to the letter T, almost to the letter U, and here you'll see the article, "The Torah Will Go Forth from Zion," addressing Micah 4, 1 through 3, and Isaiah 2, 2 through 4. Click that, and a PDF file will open up. So let's review Micah 4, 1 through 3. "And it will come about in the last days that the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains. It will be raised above the hills, and the peoples will stream to it. Many nations will come and say, 'Come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord and to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us about his ways and that we may walk in his paths. For from Zion will go forth the law, even the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he will judge between many peoples and render decisions for mighty distant nations. Then they will hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they train for war." Micah 4, 1 through 3, New American Standard. And of course, I'm sure some of you can already see various statements you are familiar with, whether it comes from a popular Paul Wilbur praise song or some of the traditional liturgy which is employed during the Shabbat service when the Torah scroll is brought forth from the ark. Within the book of Micah, this prophetic word appears among a series of messages which alternate between being either positive or negative about the future of Israel. Preceding in Micah 3, 9 through 12 is a rather negative word about Jerusalem becoming a heap of ruins, concerning the imminent future for Micah's audience. Micah 4, 1 through 5 then regards the more distant future for Israel, including some hope about how the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established on the top of the mountains. Micah 4:1, World Messianic Bible. Yet, the pattern alternates again in Micah 4:10 with a mention of Babylon and how the daughter of Zion will have to go there in exile. Later in Micah 5:5, a reference is made to Assyria invading the land of Israel. Because of the specific mention of both Babylon and Assyria, critical theologians will sometimes date the composition of the book of Micah to the exilic or post-exilic period, denying the principle of predictive prophecy. Of course, of notable interest to any Bible reader is why Micah 4:1-3 appeared in a somewhat disjointed section, which alternates between negative words of judgment and positive words which promise restoration. Either a redactor of Micah's prophecies has simply strewn different sources together and failed to really organize them, or what is seen in the book of Micah are first-hand prophetic oracles which were delivered orally and then transcribed more or less the way that the prophet originally spoke them. In the view of S. Goldman, quote, the spoken word permits of abrupt transitions more readily than does the written word, and a change of tone, expression, or gesture may have made the transitions seem more natural to Micah's listeners than to his readers, unquote. The important point which is made throughout Micah, even though there was an alternation between positive and negative words, was how God would be faithful to save Israel and bring them back to fruition. The time when Israel will be restored to its fullness will be Be'acharit Hayamim, or in the last days, Micah 4:1a, meaning for Micah's audience, when present days are past. The New International Commentary on the Old Testament. Excuse me. It is rightly concluded that these last days or end times are the Messianic age. Daniel 12:4, Hosea 3:5. At this future point in history, the Lord's house will become Rosh Heharim, or chief among the mountains. Micah 4:1b, New International Version, something which is to stand in contrast to what it has been in the past. Micah 3:9-11. Zion becoming chief or preeminent among the peaks of the earth will signify great significance and importance as past misfortunes are reversed. Jerusalem will become the focal point of all humanity. Although, as Goldman states, quote, in a figurative, not a physical sense, Zion will be the religious metropolis of the world, the focus of men's spiritual desires, unquote. He may simply want to read the prophecy as meaning that beyond people streaming to Zion, Micah 4:1c, how Zion will have a worldwide effect without people always having to go there. As Psalm 48:8 exclaims, as we have heard, so we have seen in the city of the Lord of hosts, in the city of our God, God will establish her forever. New American Standard. As people stream to Zion, then the fame of the city will spread. It is important to realize how authority in the ancient Near East was often associated with hills and mountains. In particular, how high places were sites for idolatry. 1 Kings 22:43, 2 Kings 23:3, 18:4. Yet, it is also true that Abraham sacrificed Isaac on a mountain. Genesis 22:2. Moses received the Ten Commandments on a mountain. Exodus 19:16. And the city of Jerusalem was located on a hill. Within the Tanakh, God's power is often expressed in terms of his authority over mountains. Psalm 90, verse 2, Isaiah 40, verse 12, Nahum 1:5. God's supremacy over nations and principalities can be portrayed in terms of his ownership of the mountains as creator, seen in Psalm 68:15. A mountain of God is the mountain of Bashan. A mountain of many peaks is the mountain of Bashan. New American Standard. While figuratively speaking, it is easy to see how Zion will be raised above the hills. Micah 4:1c, New American Standard, regards the city of Jerusalem taking on new prominence. This could still very well represent the enlarging of Jerusalem to new physical heights. It is frequently thought that in conjunction with the second coming of Yeshua, that there will be such seismic changes that the city of Jerusalem will be uplifted above its current elevation of 2,500 feet above sea level, Zechariah 14, 9 and 10. At the same time, an interpreter like Daniel J. Simonson prefers to look at the elevating of Zion as only being an eschatological metaphor. Quote, do mountains grow bigger? Hyperbolic language like this gives a kind of eschatological end of the world feel to this passage, especially if one is prone to think of it literally and not as a metaphor for the renewed and increased authority of the city and its temple. Unquote. Excuse me. Regardless of which position one takes, whether Zion is elevated in prominence and in physicality, or in just prominence, an era of great significance for Jerusalem will be inaugurated. It is declared, Ve nacharu alav amim. Peoples shall come streaming to it. Micah 4:1c, New English Bible. This signifies Jerusalem having more significance than just being a place for Judah and Israel to congregate, worshiping the Lord. It will be a place everyone will look to, worshiping the Lord. Ralph L. Smith describes, quote, rather than just being the worship center for the tribes of Israel, the renewed Jerusalem will be the worship center for all people. Further stating how all nations will make pilgrimages to Zion to learn the law of Yahweh and to walk in his ways. Unquote. With Jerusalem established as the chief center for the worship of God and instruction, there is a stirring in the hearts and minds of Goyim Rabim, or many nations. They say to themselves, come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord and to the house of the God of Jacob. Micah 4:2, a New American Standard. And they do not only have an interest in worshiping the Lord either. The nations say, he will teach us his ways so that we may walk in his paths. Micah 4:2b, New International Version, paraphrased by Allen as, we want him to instruct us in his way of life. We want to travel his road. New International Commentary on the Old Testament. Both Jewish and Christian interpreters have identified the he as being the Messiah who will be responsible for ruling the earth. With the nations intending to go to Zion, the narration of the prophecy made the key statement, Ki mitzion tetze Torah udevar Adonai mi Yerushalayim. For Torah shall go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Micah 4:2c, the Jerusalem Bible by Koren. While most translations will render Micah 4:2 with for, it is notable to be aware of how the Hebrew ki can possibly be rendered as because, the holiday lexicon. While the nations purpose in their hearts to go to Zion to learn, at the same time, this is accompanied by the proclamation of Torah and Davar Adonai. But do the nations purpose to go to Zion and then as a result are instructed? Or is the instruction declared and then the nations decide to go hear more? Probably a bit of both is intended, as God's word goes forth into the world and then the desire for further teaching is inquired. The verb, yatsa, appearing in the call stem, simple action, active voice, simply means go or come out. Brown Driver Briggs. Rendered in the Keter Crown Bible as emanate. The point to be recognized is that the nations, and not just Israel proper, will benefit from being instructed in God's Torah. And the benefits of being instructed from God's Torah are quite good, in fact. It is stated how the Messiah, will judge between many peoples and render decisions for mighty distant nations. Micah 4:3a, New American Standard. This righteous judgment over the nations. Lagoyim atzumim ad rachok. For strong nations far and wide. Micah 4:3a, New International Version. Actually, will serve to establish how his Torah really is proper for jurisprudence when used according to its original intention. Not only will the nations at large finally be able to be blessed by God's law, but the previous social circumstances to which Micah declared this word in ancient Israel will be gone. Leslie C. Allen comments, quote, how fitting that Jerusalem should become renowned for justice after the travesty that Micah had known within the contemporary courts. No more bribery, no more fixed verdicts. Men could be sure of finding justice. Unquote. The kinds of rulings which are to be made from a basis of Torah jurisprudence do not just concern how people are to relate to one another on either a familial or community basis. The second half of Micah 4:3 declares, they will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. New International Version. Rather than being instructed or taught, the Hebrew lamad, in the ways of war, the nations will learn of peace from the law of God, and the weapons of war will be worthless for fighting. They will instead find a more constructive and beneficial use. An era will emerge where Psalm 119, 165 will be realized. Those who love your law have great peace, shalom rav, and nothing causes them to stumble. New American Standard. No theologian or Bible teacher can express any kind of dismay at the thought of all nations being brought to the capital of God's kingdom and being instructed on how to stop their continual warfare. On the contrary, being brought to God's house, I was glad when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord, Psalm 122:1, New American Standard, and being taught from him on how to see universal shalom established is quite good. Bruce Waltke indicates how in Micah 4:1-3, there is a combination of elements all brought together. Excuse me. Quote, Moses arranged for Israel to make 3 annual pilgrimage to the central sanctuary, and David with his psalms provided a libretto to accompany their worship. Psalm 122:4. Micah enlarged it to include the nations. Unquote. Any reader or interpreter of Micah 4:2 has to acknowledge how serious it is to have God's Torah go forth from Zion. As the nations inquire, that he may teach us about his ways. New American Standard. The verb yara, primarily meaning to throw, shoot, but also direct, teach, instruct, Brown Driver Briggs, is employed, undeniably related to the noun Torah, representing God's law. The Torah will be taught to the nations from Zion, and it will enact a positive change within them. The following are a few valuable remarks made by Micah commentators. Thomas E. McKee, quote, Micah saw a change in the hearts of all peoples at this time when the law of the Lord would be received universally rather than by Israel and Judah alone, unquote. Walter Kaiser, quote, imagine the Torah as the featured attraction at the house of God for all the nations of the earth in that coming day of the Lord, unquote. And Gary V. Smith, quote, The purpose for coming to Jerusalem is not just to see the exalted mountain or the temple, but to hear the words of God, to be taught his ways, and to understand the law, Torah, from God himself. God's ways will describe how he acts and reflect who he is. His words contain his spoken will, which reveals his glorious wisdom, and his instructions direct people to walk in godly ways. Unquote. The scene of the nations going to Zion to be taught from God's Torah can definitely be compared to the giving of the new covenant in Jeremiah 31 to 34, and how being forgiven and cleansed from sin, God's Torah is to be supernaturally transcribed upon the heart. Many Christian interpreters of Micah 4:2, Old Testament theologians specifically, have understandably associated the going forth of God's word, or davar, with the gospel message of salvation, something to be connected to the going forth of God's law as his standard for proper living. James Lindbergh's thoughts are well taken. Quote, this dimension of the vision comes to expression in Acts 1:8, which announces the program for the earliest Christian mission. The book of Acts tells how that program is carried out, reporting the spread of the good news from Jerusalem to the end of the earth. Thus, for the Christian, the latter days announced in the prophetic vision have already begun. The word of the Lord, the Torah, has been going out from Jerusalem, though the task of bringing it to all nations is not yet complete. Unquote. The term shalom is missing from the prophetic word of Micah 4:1 through 3, but the concept is doubtlessly present. When the nations are instructed from God's Torah, all warfare ceases. But it is surely not enough to limit this piece to the arene of classical literature, as the Greek term arene pretty much just means cessation of conflict. With warfare ceasing via the declaration of God's word, gospel, and law, instruction, those from the nations get transformed. Allen comments that, quote, God was not to leave his enemies in the dust, but would transmute their lust for war and guide their misguided energies to better ends, unquote. G.V. Smith further indicates, quote, weapons of war and death will be destroyed and transformed into instruments of agriculture, which will preserve life, unquote. In the eschaton, a more agrarian and simple life appears to be witnessed, with a God-provided peace and security for all. Each of them will sit under his vine and under his fig tree, with no one to make them afraid, for the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken. Micah 4:4, New American Standard. With all people having been instructed from the Lord and from his law, people will no longer fight to exploit one another, even for basic food staples. The future Messianic era is one which we should all eagerly anticipate, in Goldman's view, being, quote, an idyllic picture of the blessings of peace as affecting the individual man and woman, whose well-being is in the ultimate measure of the value of a social or political system, unquote, only provided by God. Okay, and tomorrow, as we continue, we will be addressing Isaiah 2 through 4. But I think we should be able to consider, at least in a philosophical and ideological sense, how important a prophecy like this truly is. And the question, which I know is on, it should be at least, on a lot of people's minds as we contemplate when we are, and as we look out at the Messianic community, is this a prophecy which is in the midst of being fulfilled right now in our congregations and synagogues? I know that there definitely are many people who would agree, generally speaking, that yes, it probably is, and we need to take that into greater consideration. Other people, it's hard to tell, but the Lord is in control. We are in a time right now as we evaluate the post-October the 7th, 2023 situation, as we are probably going to have to sort in the not too distant future the post Operation Roaring Lion. Rising Lion was last year, and the situation in Iran. How are some of these things focusing our attention on when we are, what we need to be doing, and things which we need to see fixed and repaired? So with that in mind, that concludes our theology roundup. Now let's move on to our news roundup. We do the news roundup after the theology roundup because the news roundup is, of course, time sensitive and it changes from day to day. Although with the present situation in the Middle East, the news is something which actually changes from hour to hour. Excuse me. So we're reminded, number one, be praying for peace. Israel, Gaza, the Middle East, Iran, the whole region. Number two, peace, Russia and Ukraine. And number three, reason and sanity to prevail here on the American home front. We do have a number of stories to go through today, most of which involve the Iranian situation, but some of them involve unfolding situations here on the American home front, which are very important. And they're actually a little religious related. Okay, so all the stories I'm about to go through, these will be available for you to look at later today when this episode is archived at messianicapologetics.net, where you can read the news stories, the articles, or watch the news clips, listen to things in their entirety. All right, our first news story is from 2CTV yesterday, 4:54 p.m., and there's a 1-minute, 17-second clip. Reports from Iran show IRGC personnel operating out of school buildings converted into temporary military sites. Okay, and this is kind of this is just an old tactic of enemies. Use schools, use, places where civilians gather. I mean, I remember going back to the Desert Storm conflict, 1991, and buildings would be exploding in Iraq, and there'd be signs in front of it hastily put together, like baby food factory. So how much power, control, influence does the Islamic Republic have as of right now? This is, of course, a changing situation. But when they're having to operate out of schools or more civilian places, that is not a good sign for them. All right, so let's go to the next story. And this is reposted by Gunther Eagleman. There's a clip from Fox News, 3 minutes, 31 seconds, yesterday from 3:43 p.m. Breaking, Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg says that the Iraqi Kurds are doing something that's really hard to do by starting a full-scale ground invasion into Iran. People don't realize how big it is. So you can watch all of this in its entirety. Talks about Karg Island, known as the oil island. That's the main depot that a lot of the Iranian oil and gas goes out to the world market. Talking about you basically shut them off economically. They cannot support China. They cannot support Russia as well. So this deals with the situation as it's been unfolding. I had 2 people contact me last night, not just one, 2, about the Kurds being mobilized to take on the Iranian Republic, because the Kurds in Iran are weaponized. Of course, there's a whole big question about Kurdistan. The Kurds are a people who have no state of their own. They're spread mainly across Iran, Iraq, Syria, parts of Turkey, and that whole region. And what are the Iranian Kurds' aspirations? They make up about 10% or so of the Iranian population. Do they want to see an independent Kurdistan, or do they want more or less some, semi-autonomy within a federalized new Iranian state. I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot more about this, but the main thing is they're armed, and they're one of these groups which are going to take action against the Islamic Republic, and this is, of course, really, really big. Okay, our next story. Our next story, 2C TV, 1 minute, 47-second clip. This is from 5 o'clock p.m. yesterday. Ali Khamenei's funeral has been canceled. The apparent reason: fears that gatherings of regime leadership could be targeted during the ongoing conflict. That's not a huge surprise. And of course, you look at some of the comments below. People are saying, "Oh, I'm so sad. Me and my plus one were planning to go to this funeral, planning to mourn the loss of the Ayatollah." Yeah, right. But yeah, right now, as the Iranian regime, the Islamic Republic, tries to sort through some of their initial losses in the bombing campaign, Epic Fury, Roaring Lion, what are they going to do? And how many of them have to go underground? And they can't have, a big funeral commemoration for their supreme leader. They can't do all of these things because they know they'll be targeted by Israel, the United States, the Kurds, who knows? Okay, here's an important post from CBN News yesterday, 11:30 a.m. Goldie Gamari has a very active social media presence. She is an Iranian Canadian, and she's got a lot of the same kind of information that 2C has. My mother follows them both pretty closely. I only follow them passively as I get sent information, but as a child, Goldie Gamari had to flee opposition in Iran with her family. Today, she's a human rights activist who has been calling for international action for years against the abuses of the Islamic regime in Tehran. Now she says the regime is done. All that matters is how fast it falls. So she is the kind of person, someone who is an attorney, been involved in law, been involved in human rights types of issues. She is the kind of person who presumably will be returning to Iran when the time is right to help rebuild the country after the Islamic regime is removed. So you'll be likely hearing Tusi's name, her name, a lot more. And one of the things I would point out, when you look at the history of Iran right before the fall of the Shah, him having to, leave and being overthrown by the Islamic Republic, the country of Iran was very, and I'm going to use the term small p, progressive when it came to giving women the right to vote, right to have an education. They didn't have to wear the hijab and all of this, certainly compared to their neighbors. And why you do not see more people on the progressive left in the West saying the Islamic regime needs to go. Because, like, you see some of the interviews of the former Shah, he talks about how the women in Iran had the right to vote before women in Switzerland. So, what kind of a Middle East are we going to see post-Islamic Republic? Okay, from Fox News. This is from 2:31 p.m. yesterday, so obviously after our stream. President Trump, there's a 16-second clip. We're doing very well on the war front, to put it mildly, I would say. Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said, about a 15. We're going to continue to do well. We have the greatest military in the world by far. Okay, and that's President Trump's assessment as of yesterday of the ongoing situation. Okay, from Glenn Beck yesterday. And there's a 1 minute, 46-second clip. This is from 242. Was Trump duped by Israel into attacking Iran? Laura Trump tells me that's ridiculous. The only person who makes decisions for Donald Trump is Donald Trump, based on the intelligence, based on his assessment of things, based on the fact that he wants to put America first. Now, this is a good clip to watch. One of the things which, of course, you're beginning to hear, particularly from the woke right, people like, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes. I don't know to the extent, although I'm sure of it. People like Alex Jones, people like that, they think that, widely speaking, the United States was coerced into this conflict by Israel, rather than seeing how both Israel and the United States have complementary objectives. And as we're going to get into in just a moment, with a very, very good story, Israel has more regional goals to see achieved. The United States totally approves of those goals, but the United States has global objectives to be achieved in this conflict. All right, from Visegrad 24, yesterday, 4:52, and there's a 29-second clip. That's Greta Van Susteren and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. NATO is making sure we defend every inch of NATO territory. You saw that this morning, and that's obviously from yesterday, when news came in of a missile heading for Turkey and potentially impacting on U.S. interests in Turkey, taken out by NATO anti-missile systems. This is how it works, I assume he means. But when the Islamic Republic just started firing indiscriminately on different Arab countries, they also hit Turkey. Of course, what matters, or they fired at Turkey. What matters for this is that Turkey is a member of NATO. And yes, we got a lot of questions about Turkey and some of their Ottoman-style aspirations, but what is the Islamic Republic thinking of when they just fire indiscriminately at some of these, or seemingly indiscriminately at some of these different countries? And later we're going to report on how they fired at Azerbaijan now. So yeah, things are just getting interesting. And what are we seeing? The Iranians build up for some secret attack that, or do they have some trick up their sleeve, or instead are they just the signs of let's throw anything we can up against the wall and see what the hell sticks? I mean, that's okay. On the American front, here's a post. Here's an article from the New York Post yesterday. There were a number of posts on this yesterday. Gavin Newsom turns on Israel with blistering attack on apartheid state. Gavin Newsom is, of course, the current governor of California. Gavin Newsom has turned on Israel as he launched a blistering attack on Benjamin Netanyahu and what he called an apartheid state. The California governor made the comparison during a book event for his memoir, Young Man in a Hurry, a memoir of discovery, on Tuesday night. So while it is too early to predict the 2028 presidential election, Gavin Newsom has definitely been floated out there as a likely candidate. And so he's going out there right now and presumably saying, consider Israel an apartheid state. And we'll continue to monitor that for certain. Okay, Visegrad 24, and there's a 24-second clip here from Newsmax. This is from 6:27 p.m. yesterday. This is more from Mark Rutte. Iran was one of the key enablers of the Russian war effort against Ukraine through these weapons of destruction, these Shahad drones. The fact now that Iran is facing this full onslaught of Israel and the USA will also degrade their capacity to export their chaos to Ukraine. So that's something to keep in mind. So in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, the Russians have been using a lot of these drones provided to them by Iran. So by removing Iran, presumably the next thing which is going to have to be resolved is Russia-Ukraine. And we pray every day for peace between Russia and Ukraine. Okay, our next story. And this is from Erin Milan. She is an Australian journalist. And there's a 1-minute, 48-second clip. This is from 2:23 yesterday. Okay, something extraordinary just happened in the Middle East. Iran's actions may have done the unthinkable, according to Egyptian activist Dalia Ziada. I hope I pronounced that properly. They united Arab states with Israel and the United States. The realignment is accelerating, and the statement, the Middle East will never be the same. So, what's interesting about that is, and let's look at this in the short term, not the long term prophecy, the Gog and Magog type of stuff. Let's look at this at the short term. Operation Epic Fury, Operation Roaring Lion, right? The United States and Israel, they go in, they start bombing the Islamic Republic. And then Islamic Republic shoots back. And they just don't shoot at US or Israeli targets. They start shooting at all of these other countries, Bahrain, Qatar. And by the way, it is pronounced Qatar. I was taught it was Qatar, because yesterday I looked at something. How do you pronounce Saudi Arabia? Is it Saudi Arabia or Saudi Arabia? It is Saudi Arabia, but I take correction. Qatar. They hit the United Arab Emirates. They hit Saudi. I think I already mentioned Saudi Arabia. They hit all these other Arab countries. And rather than, well, the Arab population, we're going to absorb this as the Zionist entity and the great state. No, it's forcing some of these Arab countries to cooperate with Israel and the United States. And yes, there might be an element of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but this is not, I think, what the Islamic Republic intended. And of course, we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But in the short term, and even for prophecy's sake, while they're saying peace and safety, some people, peace is just absence of warfare. Others, it's a genuine and sincere attempt to get along and to cooperate. And I have to believe that there are people across the Arab world, they want to get along with Israel and their neighbors. They don't want this constant warfare. How possible is that? Remains to be seen. Okay, here's another story. This is from Jesse Waters yesterday, 7:32 p.m. Must watch. Peter Schweitzer says that China is panicking over the Iran war. China has lost two of its most important allies in the developing world. Half of their oil is suddenly not available to them. China provided their most advanced air defense capabilities to Iran. We completely destroy them. So there's a 4-minute, 12-second clip. So while we focus on, and a lot of Messianics, rightfully so, on the roaring lion side of this, taking out the Ayatollah, neutralizing the Islamic Republic, there's the larger geopolitical elements of this, the epic fury elements of this, the United States objectives, seeing the momentum of world influence creep back from the East, creep back from China and back toward the West, back toward the United States. And one of the main ways you do that is you cut off China from their supply of energy. That happened 2 months ago with the apprehension of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. And now it's beginning to happen with Operation Epic Fury and the removal of the Islamic Republic. And it's also being demonstrated that the Chinese military technology is not what a lot of people, especially the Iranians, thought it was going to be. Okay, so here is something, of course, we need to be concerned about, because many of you all know the expression, a trapped animal is the most dangerous. When you prepare to corner an animal to capture it, that's when it's most dangerous because it's got nothing to lose. So we need to keep this in mind, but I'm sure this is something which Israel, the United States have definitely had to factor into their war plans from the Times of Israel. And this is from yesterday, the 4th of March. Iran threatens to target Dimona nuclear site if Israel, U.S. seek to topple Islamic Republic. So this is the Israeli nuclear reactor in Dimona. It's in southern Israel. Could that be a potential target if the Iranian regime feels like it has no other choice because its days are coming to an end and they're just going to go scorched earth, as it were? But I have to believe that both Israel, the U.S., regional partners, they've taken this into consideration. But this was just reposted by there's a Reuters article posted by Times of Israel. So this is why we pray for peace, why we pray for a quick, decisive resolution. All right, next story from the New York Post, and this is useful to read through why Kurds could be the biggest threat to the mullahs as fighters launch ground offensive against Iran. This was posted 6:43 p.m. Eastern, and I actually got a number of people contacting me about how thousands of Kurdish fighters launched a ground offensive inside Iran on Wednesday, according to reports, following claims that Israel and the U.S. were hoping that the armed ethnic minority group could help overthrow the Islamic regime. And so, this is just a useful thing to look at. The Kurdish people predominantly live in Turkey, Iraq, Syria, and Iran, with more than 8 million living in Iran, about 10% of the total population. Okay, let's go up just a moment. All 6 of the major political factions representing Kurds in Iran joined a new coalition on Wednesday aimed at forming an autonomous territory within the country, the group's leadership announced. So we just have to wait and see what's going to happen with the Kurds and Iran and the role that they're going to play possibly in seeing the Islamic Republic overthrown. And along with that, seeing how a new Iranian government comes forth and the kind of organization it's going to have, some kind of a federalism possibly. Okay, now a big part of what we do on the news roundup for Messianic Insider is we monitor growing anti-Semitism and growing anti-Zionism. And we see what things are being posted and sent out there, which can affect people we know about and people we care about. And indeed, since October the 7th, 2023, the Messianic community, various congregations have seen people leave because of, well, Israel's just a terrible genocidal state. We've all heard that. And to be honest, if Israel wanted to wipe out all of the Palestinians in the West Bank, they would have done so. At the same time, there are a lot of people who were once supporters of the state of Israel and Zionism and now have reverted to replacement theology. This is the kind of thing which affects them. From the X channel Smash Baals, there you see an image of a golden calf painted with an Israeli flag. Questioning Israel is a golden calf in the American evangelical church that needs to be torn down. And of course, his idea is the church is the new Israel. America should not be supporting Israel. Judaism is a false religion. America is a Christian country. Judaism needs to be made illegal. So how do we deal with this as a Messianic community today? Are we dealing with it? Are we thinking it'll just blow over and it'll just dissipate? Or if it gets really, really bad, a pre-tribulation rapture escape will come and beam us out to heaven. I mean, these are some of the things which I have encountered. This is why we go to different, large conference level events to see what people are talking about or what people are not talking about. Okay. I need to. All right, our next story. This is from the Free Press, and I highly recommend you watch this. This is very, very good. Haviv Reteg Gur explains why the war with Iran isn't just about Iran, it's about China. And here he lays out how, while, yes, we've got Operation Epic Fury, we also have Operation Roaring Lion. Israel has local objectives to the Middle East to be achieved, but the United States has global objectives to be achieved. And a lot of it does involve crawling back the momentum of world influence from China by cutting China off from energy. Now, Israel's goals and the United States goals are complementary right now, but Israel's more concerned with local Middle East. The United States says that's great, but the United States is very concerned about China. So that's a really good thing to watch. I got a lot of really good points from that. And I'm going to just politely point this out. I'm sure this next week, Shabbat, you all are going to be praying for Israel, praying for the safety of Israel, praying for Operation Roaring Lion. But remember this, Israel could not do what it's doing right now if U.S. objectives did not also intersect with that, and U.S. objectives are always going to be in the wider global sphere. So what Israel is doing, very important. Pray for Israel, pray for the safety of the IDF, but pray for the safety of U.S. forces, our soldiers and our sailors, our men and women in uniform, because what they're doing is they're serving the interests of the wider West, Western civilization, to make sure that Western influence continues, at least for an elongated season right now, as we prepare to sort through when we are and what we need to be doing as God's people. Okay, there's a lot of news right now regarding Tucker Carlson once again, and some of the things that he has said about Judaism, in particular the Chabad movement. So, number of posts. This is 1 minute 10 seconds, where he talks about the reconstruction of the third temple. So there are a number of posts we're going to have on this and people responding to it. But Tucker Carlson raising awareness that there are religious Jews out there who are wanting to rebuild the third temple. And of course, a lot of this is propaganda along the lines of not that they want to rebuild the third temple, but we're going to have a holy religious war. The Dome of the Rock is going to be blown off the Temple Mount. Humanity's going to come to, the human species is going to come to an end because Israel's is a dangerous, rogue terrorist state, whatever it is. Now, there's going to be some more responses. I saw some more responses right before we went live. Most premillennialists who I know who believe that there's going to be a future abomination of desolation, there's going to be future sacrifices on the Temple Mount, whether that's in a rebuilt temple or a minimalist view would be some kind of a tabernacle as existed during the reign of King David. But the point is, you got animal sacrifice on the Temple Mount. Most premillennialists I know do not believe that the Dome of the Rock, the Islamic Dome of the Rock, is going to be removed from the Temple Mount. They think that there's going to be Dome of the Rock, rebuilt third temple, or at least a tabernacle side by side, because the anti-Messiah is going to want to bring all religions together, in particular the Abrahamic religions. All paths lead to the universal consciousness or intelligence, or in his case, me, as he will declare. So most I know or know of in the end times world, they don't think that the Dome of the Rock is going to be destroyed. They think both the Dome of the Rock and a rebuilt third temple will be side by side. Now, subsequent to the second coming, we would expect the Dome of the Rock to be removed. And when we go into the millennium, it's going to be either a refurbished, cleaned out third temple, or perhaps even a fourth temple. I leave that open-ended. There are things, of course, we don't know yet. We have to just wait until we get there. Okay, another person who's causing some stir on social media, Megyn Kelly. I mean, her devolution is very fast right now. But here, she's interviewing someone, and there's a 35-second clip. This is from yesterday, 8:44. And this individual, Bren, who is commenting on it, and there's some other people who are going to be saying things too. I can't believe Megyn Kelly actually said this. She claimed Israel is paying Americans $7,000 to post pro-Israel content on social media. That's the kind of conspiracy theory you usually hear from anonymous internet trolls, not a high-profile political commentator. She can't seriously believe that, right? And indeed, I have never been paid a single cent from the government of Israel or even AIPAC, some kind of pro-Israel group here in the States, to make comments which are pro-Israel, pro-Zionist, pro-Judaism. I've got bills to pay. Where's my check? At times we find it difficult enough to, hey, consider signing up for $25 or $50 a month. It'll pay for a bill here or a bill there. But we're going to see over the coming days how people respond to Megyn Kelly and other things she is likely to be talking about if past this prologue with Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes. We'll put Alex Jones in there too. If she follows in their pattern, she's going to make some other really dumb, stupid statements. All right, this is really sad. This is the first post I saw on it. Some of you are probably aware of it by now. Charisma. Lou Holtz dies at 89. How faith shaped the life of a Notre Dame football legend. So he will definitely be missed. Not that I followed Lou Holtz that closely, but he represents a previous era, not only generationally, but also in sports, which we will never see again. So our condolences, our thoughts and prayers go out to his family, his friends, and of course, his many, many fans. We definitely are going to feel the loss of people like him because whether you like it or not, celebrities, people in sports, especially if they are professing believers, they can have an influence on many, many people. Oh, well, Lou Holtz believes that. Maybe I need to take it seriously. I know some of us don't like to hear that you're getting your theology or your spirituality from sports legends, but that is part of life sometimes. All right, our next story, and this is involving Nick Fuentes, and it involves the Third Temple. There's a 2-minute, 7-second clip. This is from yesterday, 11:30 p.m., but I got it in the evening. Nick says things are getting very real. Israel. And the clip in the quotation is, if Israel wins, they're building the Third Temple. If they succeed, that's the end of everything. So obviously, Nick Fuentes is going to say more about this in further posts, further shows. And the whole idea is that mainly this Third Temple intending to bring in the Messiah is really intending to bring in the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist, the apocalypse, and human civilization is over. So Israel has to probably be stopped. That's the narrative that a lot of these kinds of posts feed. And what are we doing about it as Messianic people? Are we ignoring it? Are we paying attention to it? Do we know anyone who's influenced by some of these ideas? Okay, our next post, Visegrad 24, and this is from this morning, 3:05 a.m., and there's a 13-second clip. Iranian suicide drones keep striking Nakhchivan, I probably mispronounced that, airport in Azerbaijan. Iran is now attacking almost every country they can. The neighboring countries won't put up with this craziness for too long. Yeah, so what is Iran trying to do? Now they're hitting Azerbaijan. Okay, this past week here in the U.S., we did have a political election, mostly to choose candidates for the midterms. And here in the state of Texas, a gentleman by the name of James Tallarico, some of you may have heard of him, won the Democratic nomination for senator. And we're still waiting to find out if he's going to run against John Cornyn or Ken Paxton. But James Tallarico, a lot of information out about him because he is a devout Christian, a Presbyterian, a seminarian, no less. And as we're beginning to see, he represents very progressive Christian views. So I got a number of stories to go through him, just briefly summarizing a number of his positions. This is from Protestia. There's a 1-minute, 18-second clip. That's him preaching at his church. Texas Senate hopeful James Tallarico says that being Christian and being pro-choice are absolutely consistent because Christianity is a feminist religion, before explaining that Jesus was a radical feminist and probably pro-choice. Okay, so that's one position he takes. Okay, another story involving him. This is from yesterday, 4:46 p.m., 59-second clip from the Daily Wire. James Tallarico, the quote-unquote Christian who just won the Democrat nomination for the U.S. Senate in Texas, used the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary to justify abortion. Creation has to be done with consent. You cannot force someone to create. And here the commentary from the X channel Theo World. James Tallarico is obviously a total wolf in sheep's clothing. But to left-wingers and journalists, this is what a devout Christian actually looks like. So here we're just cataloging some of the positions, some of the big things you're going to start hearing more and more about as it concerns James Tallarico. So there are already people I'm seeing in comments who are comparing him to the rise of Barack Obama all the way back in 2004. Some of you may have been watching the Democratic convention. John Kerry, state senator from Illinois, Barack Obama, he was obviously a progressive Christian as well. Likewise, here in the state of Texas, he comes kind of in the tradition of Beto O'Rourke, who has tried to run for governor. I believe he tried to run for Senate too. Yes, he did. Let me confirm that he ran for governor. It's been a number of years. Yes, he was the candidate in 2022. Ran against Greg Abbott. But he kind of comes in that tradition, and he's Presbyterian. He tries to be kind of folksy, but he represents some very progressive points of view. Okay, and another story regarding him. From Reverend Jordan Wells, who concludes that James Tallarico is the greatest false prophet in America right now, a wolf in seminarian's clothing, twisting scripture to push abortion, trans ideology, and God is non-binary nonsense, while claiming atheists are more Christ-like than actual Christians. And here you have Skeletor, the channel on X. It shocked me to hear progressives say, we finally have a candidate who can speak to red state voters. And his conclusion, it showed me how much they don't understand anyone but themselves. So there are a lot of things which are probably going to be coming out, especially for those of us who live here in Texas, in the coming weeks and months regarding James Tallarico, who, because there's not a known Republican candidate, he's got a head start on the GOP here. And I'm not so concerned about him winning as much as his ideas beginning to percolate to a lot of Christian people. Because, he's a very nice looking person, very well spoken, seminarian. So you assume he's academic. He's read things. He's looked into things. From the evangelical tradition I come from, these sorts of issues, his sorts of positions are addressed pretty straightforwardly and pretty well. So when he talks about things like abortion or transgenderism or atheists are better, if you come from a good conservative evangelical but non-fundamentalist background, you can address these things pretty easily. I mean this with all the love and respect in the world. Today's Messianic community, and I can say this after being involved for 30 years, does not handle liberal theology, progressive theology very well. So when liberal theological ideas come to the forefront, you're more likely to encounter them from Christians than Jewish people, although they're alive and well in Reform Judaism, even conservative Judaism. The Messianic community, in my experience, and I hope I'm wrong with your congregation or synagogue, but in my experience, tends to put these issues off to the side for another day or just act like you didn't say anything. But when you've got prominent politicians, in this case, someone who's a seminarian, a devout Presbyterian, even though I believe he's PC USA, which is the progressive one, what is he going to say about these social issues? How do you engage with some of his positions? Thus far, we haven't heard him say anything about or really anything about the situation in the Middle East, Gaza, Iran, but we know it's coming. We know it's coming. So we will stay informed as best we can as to Tallarico. But assuming even that he might lose this to the Republican candidate, he's the kind of person who's not going to go away. He is in the political machine. He's a rising star. He's not somebody who is going to go away. He doesn't seem like somebody, if he loses, that he's going to quit. So this will be a sight to behold. And I note the fact that he is someone younger than me. The vice president's also younger than me, too. All right. Okay, we've got 10 more stories, and I'll try to go through these a little more quickly. From Visegrad 24, today, March the 5th, Greta Thunberg finally comments on Iran, but only for a chance to blame Israel. And her post, Iran death toll reaches 787. And the conclusion here is she also spreads information from Al Jazeera, Islamist Qatari state news. Sorry. So Greta Thunberg's not going away anytime soon. But to counterbalance that, here's a story from Tusi TV, 7:04 a.m. today, 1 minute 55 seconds. Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi urges remaining members of the Islamic regime in Iran to surrender and prepare for the transition government. So as we see Epic Fury, Roaring Lion continue, the Kurds in Iran who are armed begin to go after the Islamic Republic. What kind of defections are we going to see? What kind of a new Iranian government are we going to see begin to form? I'm of the opinion, although I could be wrong, that we are likely to see some kind of a constitutional monarchy with the crown prince return and become the new Shah. We could still see a democratic republic, and some kind of a federal system would also be logical, especially given the different demographic groups of Iran. Okay, Visegrad 24, 5:50 a.m. this morning. The state media of the Islamic regime in Iran, IRIB, has been hacked and is now broadcasting a video message from Iranian Crown Prince Pahlavi Reza. The regime will fall is the conclusion. So the momentum is building. The momentum is building. Okay. Here are some more remarks, more responses to what Tucker Carlson is saying. So from the X channel Joel Mowbray, Tucker Carlson claims that a sect of Judaism called Chabad is ultimately behind the military strikes on Iran. And his conclusion, this might be Tucker's most absurd claim to date. And Ian Miles Chong also responds to this. Tucker is going completely over the line with this conjecture about religious Jews trying to take over the world. He should be embarrassed with what he's putting out there. This is a far cry from the Tucker Carlson on Fox News who commanded respect for speaking the truth and not making things up. And there's a 1 minute, 56 second clip there. So what is happening with Tucker Carlson? And I know people have speculated, well, he's got major, financial backers, mainly from Qatar, others, especially those of us who look at things more theologically, more spiritually. He's accepted some really bad teaching. He's not born again. Let's just be honest. He's not spiritually regenerated, and he's opened himself up to some very bad spiritual influences. And I mean, it's very obvious that a Nick Fuentes, he's totally demon possessed, because if he weren't, he wouldn't be using all this bad language left and right. And you've got Candace Owens. She's turned over. Also, you've got people like Megyn Kelly. She is in process. We're waiting to see what's going to happen with her. But yeah, there's some really bad things taking place right now. And these all affect us as today's Messianic community. Do I believe that the Chabad is trying to take over? No, I don't. I think this is total nonsense. It's absolutely absurd. Here's some more comments on what Tucker Carlson has said. 1 minute, 10 second clip from him. from Mark Kennedy, a Jewish political guru. Tucker's false attack on Chabad is dangerous. Be obsessed with Israel if you want. I don't care. But targeting Chabad like this puts a target on every Hasidic Jew. A Chabad rabbi was just killed in Bondi, Australia. A Chabad rabbi was killed in the UAE not long ago, and a Chabad rabbi and his wife were murdered in the Mumbai terror attacks. This isn't a joke. And his two questions: what is Tucker doing? Is anyone going to speak up about this? Well, we're going to do our best to speak up about this because, look, you can disagree with the Chabad, you can disagree with Orthodox Judaism, you can disagree with Judaism, but you be careful to not be someone who promotes or incites violence against others. You can have ideological disagreements, theological disagreements, spiritual disagreements. You can even say someone is full of demons, somebody is full of shit, somebody is all, fracked up. You can say that, but it stops at the language. It stops at the verbal discussion. You also have to temper everything you say with, look, we have disagreements, very strong disagreements with another group, but we pray that they have an encounter with God and that they change their ways, whether you agree or disagree. And Tucker Carlson isn't doing that. Now, I've got disagreements with Chabad. There are a lot of people in the Messianic community who have disagreements with Chabad, but we also know that many of them are genuine. They're sincere. They want to see, they're all about doing good works, and they want to see tikkun olam. They want to see repairing of the breach. They want to see a lot of good things happen in their communities, in society at large. And I think that I think they're more interested in things like Torah study than they are interested in about controlling politics and the world. Obviously, Tucker Carlson hasn't been moving in that direction. Okay, we've got 5 more stories to go through, and then we will conclude. Okay, this is more from Mark Rutte, Secretary General of NATO, 5:25 a.m., Visegrad. Rutte, NATO's Article 5 will not be invoked following the incident involving an Iranian missile in Turkish airspace. Now, is this something which can change? Of course it can change. He says that NATO closely monitoring developments in the Middle East and that the alliance supports the United States in its strikes against Iran, as the country had almost become a threat to Europe as well. Okay, so NATO is, of course, going to be monitoring the situation, the Epic Fury conflict, very, very closely, but it's premature for NATO to get all out involved in this. I don't think this situation is going to get that big. From Open Source Intel Defender, 10:26 a.m. this morning. In an 8-minute interview with Axios on Thursday, President Donald J. Trump acknowledged that Mojtaba Khamenei, Iranian politician and son of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is the most likely successor and next supreme leader of Iran, which he stated is unacceptable, and that he needs to be personally involved in selecting Iran's next leader, just as he was in Venezuela. Right. And I can tell you this, and you can read more about this. President Trump is not going to select some religious cleric as the next leader of Iran if he follows through with this claim here. He's going to want someone who, whether you like this or not, serves the interests of the West and of the United States. That's what he's going to want. And he's going to want somebody who he can cut business deals with for energy, for rare earth minerals, and for economic development and reconstruction. That's what the president's going to want. And I don't see it happening from any of the people who are those religious clerics or members of the current regime, unless they really go out of their way to defect. They bring information with them. They say, hey, we know this, we know that. Show me mercy, show me, give me immunity, and I will tell you where this happened, that happened, etc. I just don't see him, the president, approving of a new leader of Iran who has been so embroiled in this current regime. Okay, 3 more stories. This is from Open Source Intel. and there's a 1 minute, 23-second clip, 9:22 a.m. this morning. Azerbaijan's President Aliyev responding to Iran's drone strike. And so he talks about, we are ready to show our strength against any evil force and let them not forget this is in Iran. So, of course, a number of weeks ago, the vice president visited Azerbaijan, and then he visited Armenia. It was in that order, I believe. Yes. So Azerbaijan sits to the immediate north of Iran. Many of you all probably aware how Azerbaijan is one of the main suppliers to Israel of Israel's oil. But Azerbaijan also has important economic and security ties to the West. So we continue to wait and see what's going to come from that situation. Okay, another major part, of course, Israel's objectives involving Roaring Lion are to see Iran's proxy states, terror network dismantled. So this is very important. This is from today. Eyal Yacobi posting a 1 minute, 2-second clip, 9:51 a.m. Breaking. Lebanon just banned all IRGC activity in the country and vowed to arrest any Guard members. So the Lebanese appear to be making important strides to stopping Iranian activity in Lebanon, stopping Hezbollah activity in Lebanon. Yeah, the Lebanese situation is very complicated, but a lot of it does go back to Iranian proxy networks. Okay, and our final story from today, before we went live, open source intel, 11:04 a.m. Just in, Iran's state TV hacked again with a message warning. Whoever follows Mojtaba Khamenei will meet the same fate. Security forces ordered to put down their weapons and issued an ultimatum. So there's a 46-second clip you can see there. So these are the kinds of transmissions to the people of Iran that, it's time for you to, if you're part of the IRGC, you're part of the Iranian regime, the current government, you need to defect. You need to lay down your arms. Likewise, the Iranian people, action is being taken by Israel, by the United States, by other regional partners on their behalf, and that they need to be ready for some things to take place. So we are now 5 to 6 days into this conflict. I know that many of us last week, after the negotiations were wrapping up in Geneva, we were kind of concerned, is the president going to cut a deal with the Iranians? What is this going to make him look like? Obviously, that was not the case. I had really no doubt in my mind that we were barreling toward some kind of a conflict. But how long is this conflict going to be? Is it going to be quick and decisive? It's obviously going to take a lot longer than 12 days, the 12-day war from last year. But we wait and see. And we continue to pray for quick, decisive resolution. We do pray for peace. We pray for the believers, the Iranian Christians, many of whom are underground, the Messianic Jewish community in Israel, and that all of these people ultimately, including the new possible Ayatollah, have a supernatural encounter with the risen Yeshua, because he's the only one who can bring peace to the Middle East, peace to the world. And that concludes our episode for today. Of course, tomorrow we'll be addressing with this, the nation streaming to Zion in the end times. We'll be addressing Isaiah 2:2-4. As always, on behalf of Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and support for our ministry efforts. Please do consider signing up for a monthly $25 or $50 donation. If you have not already, be sure to visit my website, messianicapologetics.net, where you can access a wide array of articles, frequently asked questions entries. You can take a look at some back issues of Outreach Israel News, back episodes of Messianic Insider, different McKee Moment shorts, and generally take a look at our ministry adventures over the years. Please be sure to give this episode a thumbs up or a heart, as it will help its exposure on social media. And please consider reposting it to your social media feeds: Facebook, X, Instagram. Email it to a friend. We will see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.